Of July, the Phoenix Suns are into the NBA Finals. Oh my gosh, it hurts. We'll talk about that, how they built their roster, what it means. Rumors of Kawhi Leonard, Dame Lillard hanging with Dwyane Wade at a WNBA game. Maybe we should be really concerned about that. Oh, maybe that wouldn't be concerning at all. We'll talk about all those things. Plus, it's our first live YouTube new version of the show available to you on live chat, interaction, and all. It's coming up on today's edition of Locked on Jazz. Pow! How are you? I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thanks for joining me for a live show. We've done live shows for a long time, but with the new evolution of Locked On, the growth, the show will now be available for you on YouTube each and every day, which means that we will generally go live every day as well. And you can get the show on YouTube. Right now, it's under the Locked On Live channel. Subscribe or follow on that, and that will transition to a Locked On Jazz channel here in the next little few days. So we'll have chat open almost every day on the program throughout the offseason. Get your thoughts on players and things of that nature and do all of that. So excited to have you aboard kind of the next iteration. We've got about 22 shows up on YouTube, and we'll keep growing with more and more. Was I the only one who watched the Phoenix Suns celebration yesterday? Just kind of a little despondent, depressed, and overwhelmed. Monty Williams is such a great story that you kind of decided that I think you could understand. You had some heartwarming aspect of it. But it was hard to watch. Maybe it's not fair. I thought we would beat the Suns, but frankly, we didn't do much against them during the regular season. They completely shut us down every time we played them. I had faith that our coaching staff and players would figure that out in a playoff series. And so with Ayton out there and allowing Gobert to play the whole time, I thought that was a good matchup for us and that we would have a chance, but we never got it. Give them credit. That performance by Chris Paul was like, you don't see 36 years old, 41 points, 16 years in the league. Like, you just don't see that. Chris Paul's got, he's a toad. He's got all sorts of warts all over him. That Clipper team didn't get along well enough, largely because of his personality. Even practice was the stories. Numerous free agents along the way never wanted to re-sign because he was so overbearing with his overwhelming competitiveness. But he also clearly goes to these teams, gives them confidence, changes who they are, and change the landscape of who the Phoenix Suns are as a franchise. So in that sense, I think you've got to give, there's no question you're giving credit at this point, but I mean, he's changed the narrative on his career. Paul George changed the narrative on his career. Reggie Jackson changed the narrative on his career. And I think that is one of the two major stories to me of where I think you have to take this. And guys like me are the problem here, not the solution, is that you see these guys play and, we forget they're human. We forget that they evolve. We try to stamp them as who they are, and there's an evolution to who a player is. Paul George had certainly had plenty of bad free agent moments along the way, but in this realm, he gave it all. He wasn't good last night, but I think it's pretty fair to understand he probably didn't have much left in the tank. And so here's a guy who's doing, a pretty great job at evolving and becoming a lead player back to his Indiana days and getting comfortable with that and had a just brilliant playoff series. And so I think the narrative on who Paul George is different. The narrative on who Chris Paul is different. That Reggie Jackson was on the scrap heap and available for free, and his buddy Paul George basically called him and talked him into coming to play. I think he went a little ways without playing there for a while, because he had been an incredibly selfish player. He was a bad teammate. He didn't want to sit on the bench in Oklahoma City and got a bad reputation out of that as he got booted out the door, and players killed him on his way out the door out of Oklahoma City. And in turn, he ends up, going to Detroit and being the number one guy, and it doesn't turn out great for him. And then he's on the scrap heap. And now he comes back and he understands maybe, where he overshot what he thought he could do and where he kind of made his mistakes along the way. And he's human. He grows up. And he was an incredible player for the Clippers. I don't know how they're going to re-sign him with his salary situation, but he was incredible for them. He single-handedly beat us. Without Reggie Jackson, we win that series. And it's an evolution of a person. Monty Williams as a coach was not very good in New Orleans, frankly. It was unimaginative. It wasn't cross screening big to big with Anthony Davis. It's a bunch of stuff, but he got his guys to play hard, and then he evolved over time and added more elements to him as a head coach. So, I thought Reggie Jackson's presser last night was a great reminder that, one, these guys are human and they evolve and they change and they go through the same experiences that, frankly, most of us did in our lives if we're thriving and striving for anything, except for the fact that they're doing it while they're on a stage with, all of us critiquing them at every moment, expecting them to be fully formed, mature human beings at 21 or 22 while having millions of dollars being thrown at them and distractions that you and I have never experienced. And they evolve through that. And frankly, with pressure that none of us have ever experienced. Did Paul George, have mental issues in the bubble last year? He said he did. Has he probably cracked, as we like to say in sports, which is the wrong term, in multiple playoff series? Yeah. Did those experiences get him better? Yes, today. Yes, that's actually what happens. And so, I think that's a huge part of this story is these guys all evolving, and you got to be really careful of who you put the cement, not tombstone, but cement title on as a player and what they are, and believe that they don't have another step in what they're saying to be able to evolve as a player and as a person. I think that's a huge part of this. The other one I think is that and I want to get into the Suns roster construction. The way I'm going to try to, this show is new to me. Like, this actually feels like the first day I've ever done this show by having it be live and knowing it's going to always be live. And we've done a bunch of live shows. But what I'm going to try to do with the live chat, so everyone knows, is I'm going to try to do kind of my regular 2 segments, some days all 3, but then turn the 3rd segment into the quick interactive chat of the show. So that's my quick vision of how I want to do this and have more interaction and more involvement, but at the same time, not lose the show and what it is. I don't want to lose this whole segment, but I'll give a funny story about one of my days as a program director and my belief in why this is. So I'll share that with you in a second. But I still think the biggest story that's not being talked about right now is in the NBA is that maybe there's a new world here. Maybe it's an injury-laden season that's different than any other we're ever going to have. But you know what? Kyrie Irving and Kevin Love got hurt. Like Klay Thompson got hurt. Like I find that narrative a little false, one, because I don't think there's the data to back it up. But, like Kawhi Leonard doesn't have a title if the Warriors don't have injuries. And the Warriors don't have a title maybe if Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving don't have injuries. And those are just in NBA finals. We can go back through just about every year of every playoffs. And yes, this year feels way more extreme when the 2 best players in the world in Kawhi Leonard and, Giannis Antetokounmpo are going to miss games. And then the 3rd best player in the world probably is, Anthony Davis. And I understand LeBron should be in here somewhere and Jokic is in here somewhere. And then the next, right? Like if you just kind of walk through it, certainly it does feel more significant this year than ever before. And then there's a nice nifty narrative to fit to that, which is the fact that, we're playing on this short season. I think the real story of this season is since Magic Johnson and Larry Bird entered the league in 1979, we have never gone 4 years with 4 different champions. It's never happened before. The last time we had 4 years with 4 different champions was the 76-77 Portland Trailblazers, the 77-78 Bullets, the 78-79 Sonics, and the 79-80 Lakers. Now, if the Suns win this title, yes, you could probably make an argument they're the worst NBA title team since the 78-79 Sonics, which were not a particularly great team. And then Magic and Larry came into the league and the superstars ruled and Moses Malone got to Philadelphia and they snuck a title in. But, from 79 to 88, there was only one team other than the Lakers or Celtics that won a title. Then for the next 5 years, there were only 2 teams that won a title. For the next, if you actually stretch that out to 10 years, there were only 3 teams that won a title: Chicago, Houston, and Detroit. And then we went into the Spurs-Laker era where we went for 5 years and nobody won a title but the Spurs or Lakers. Like, this may be a very, very different world than we've had before. Dallas snuck one in 2010-11, and Detroit with the Ben Wallace Detroit team snuck one in on the backside of 03-04. But again, it was the Heat and the Spurs that dominated. Then it was the Cleveland and the Warriors, and the Raptors snuck. But maybe all of a sudden it's the Warriors in 17-18 at the end of their dynasty, the Raptors in 18-19 in their one-year run, the Lakers in 19-20, who might turn out to be a one-year run. We'll see how LeBron, Anthony Davis, how it's reformed. In 2021, now you're going to see a new team. And if you start to look into this, the NBA signed a new collective bargaining agreement. And if it wasn't for the spike that took place in the salary structure that allowed Kevin Durant to super team it, this might actually be the new NBA. So let's talk about that, the impact of that, and then look at the Suns roster construction if we can. Today's show is brought to you by my good friends over at grip6.com. I'm not wearing a Grip 6 belt right now, but I should be. You'll now know when I tell the truth if I'm wearing it. Grip6.com. The honeycomb belt is my favorite. You get the strap and a separate buckle. You can interchange them, so you buy multiple straps, and you have a brown, a black, and a blue belt. I have multiple buckles, so now you can switch through and have it just all fit. My honeycomb suddenly is on my silver belt right now because I switched it off the blue because I was wearing that more during golf season right now when I was wearing my belts and with my shorts, and so I switched it. That's the flexibility. The belts are amazing, engineered without holes, without holes, flaps, or bulk. Quality craftsmanship guaranteed, an unlimited lifetime warranty on Utah's company. Plus, they've got great wool socks and fabulous new wallets. It's all at grip6.com. Use the promo code LOCKED ON to get 15% off. It's promo code LOCKED ON to get your discount. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends at Biograss. That's the big yellow bag. Is your lawn, is your garden the most beautiful garden in town? It should be, and it can be, with the big yellow bag. Quality black garden soil and mulch delivered free to your home. It's a really cool Utah company. My friend Doug Jardine introduced me to them. Doug's been around for a long time. He's in the media world now. And he has been, and they have just done, it's a cool Utah company. The grandfather, I think it is now, was originally actually in the Reagan administration, working with them. And Clark gave me the whole family history and how they built this together, and it's grown through. So this is just another cool company. It's a great product. The big yellow bag comes to you with an easy empty system that makes the job easier to remove your garden soil. It's the best garden soil you can bet. They've put all sorts of science into it. It's not your typical garden center topsoil. This is higher quality, and that's what the big yellow bag is all about. Go to bigyellowbag.com right now. Use the promo code LOCKED ON and get $40 off your big yellow bag. That's all at bigyellowbag.com. Hey, it's Quentin from Grip 6. Here he is. Let's give a little shout out. If you haven't bought a Grip 6 by now, what are you even doing? He says. That's Quentin. He actually works at Grip 6. So give him a little, it's the part of the community. Got to love having him jump on there for a second at the Grip 6. Guys jumping on for a second. All right, let's, so what does it mean if I do believe that there might be a new NBA world here? And part of what I mean by a new NBA world is we're sitting here as a fan base feeling like, oh my gosh, well, so's Philadelphia, so's Brooklyn, so's Denver, so are the Clippers, so are the Lakers, and maybe even Dallas a little bit. Like, there are all these teams that are sitting here feeling as though they should be winning their, having won it. And I think that's the new world. And I think this also impacts greatly how we decide to rebuild and what we do to make changes to our roster. Because I don't know that it's going to be necessary to have as an outlandishly unbelievable team as it was for a while, right? When you look back at the championships that we just kind of were referencing and all those teams, like those Spurs teams had 3 Hall of Famers on it. And maybe the Suns do have 3 Hall of Famers. Maybe DeAndre Ayton, Devin Booker, and Chris Paul all become Hall of Famers. I mean, DeAndre Ayton's the number one pick. Number one picks become Hall of Famers quite regularly. The Warriors, that team, that's just loaded. That Miami Heat team, loaded. I mean, if you look at the past champions, and maybe when we get out and back into a regular world and we're not in the bubble and things like it won't be as it won't be as have as much parity. But you look at these teams, and other than the 10-11 Dallas Maverick team, which had two Hall of Famers, Jason Kidd and Dirk Nowitzki, and that was a funky year. I mean, Derrick Rose wins an MVP on a year he probably shouldn't have. LeBron probably should have won the MVP, but those Lakers teams of 9, 10, and those are loaded. That Celtic 07, 08 team is loaded. This Suns team doesn't feel that loaded, nor does our Jazz team, frankly. And yet you're in it. So you may not have to be building as dominating a team as you once did to win an NBA title. There really may have been, and there's just so many stars in the league rising up. And so, somewhat I do think that means you better be careful in overreacting to a playoff series loss. Now, you don't want to underreact because then you're just not, you're not doing anything. But there is a part to me that says, hey, wait a sec. The Jazz ran into the worst matchup possible. Had they gotten the same route as Phoenix, they probably fall to the Clippers in the conference finals, and we're not worrying about it in the same way. I think, the Clippers had our number. I don't think I would try to change that narrative at all. And you're probably not getting the NBA finals without fixing that. And so we need to add some roster versatility, but I don't think we need to overwhelm our roster. Phoenix has a nice job. James Jones did a nice job with roster versatility in the, having the Dario Saric lineup that was so successful for them during the season. Last night, everything was successful. By the way, can we call me out on terrible narrative? Like, if we're gonna always talk about things we think are that, like, when we think we're good at stuff, like, can we call me out? Because my whole premise was that Phoenix was getting bad shots and wasn't going to score over 95 points a game, and they scored 130. Now, I think the Clippers cracked and broke and didn't have the juice and the energy anymore. But let's call me out. I was wrong. Like, I sit here and pontificate as though I know what's going on all the time. That take couldn't have been worse. That Phoenix was having a hard time getting good looks and good shots and wasn't going to score again in the series, and I was concerned for him for that. So they just dropped 130 instead along the way. So that, I guess you can be pretty wrong on that. And, the other one on this is we can talk about roster versatility and all of that, but frankly, the Suns found the lineup that worked. I mean, Dario Saric, who was their number one plus-minus player during the regular season, and that's where that versatility mattered to them, played a grand total of 8 minutes in the series and did not play in the second half. There wasn't a lot of roster versatility going on in the second half. Cameron Payne, I think, snuck in about 4 minutes in the second half, and Torrey Craig basically was their one bench player that played for them last night in the second half. In the first half, they did kind of roll out about 4 minutes to open up the second quarter with some bench with Chris Paul and Cameron Payne and some bench guys on. But it wasn't long before Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton were back out on the floor. I think it was about 3 minutes and 30 seconds of bench play in that second quarter. So that you're not seeing, let's not get overwhelmed here again by roster versatility. And I know there's going to be a lot of talk about depth and injuries, but frankly, it's the top 8 that are winning it along the way. James Jones won GM of the year. Dennis Lindsay actually finished second for the Phoenix Suns. And really is an interesting story because James Jones, who's running that front office, did not have a great deal of experience before he took that job. His experience was an incredibly long NBA career that spanned, 709 games over, I think, 14 years, and, goes by the name Champ because he won, I think, 4 or 5 rings by hanging out with LeBron in Cleveland and Miami. And yet somebody clearly saw that he had some other depth to him, because that's not he retires in 2017 and he's running the Suns front office shortly thereafter. And so give the Suns some credit on kind of reading that and understanding his role. He takes over the job in 2018, replacing Ryan McDonough, shared responsibilities in the 18-19 season during that period, and then was named the GM in 2019, 2 years after leaving the league. the name Shane Battier has been bounced around a lot with the Jazz recently because of his CAA and Dwyane Wade connections, and he falls into this model of former player must have, James Jones must have some feel for the league in some way. And if you kind of look at, what he did he starts to he gets named GM really fully in April of 2019, and he puts his stamp on it by firing Igor and hiring Monty Williams. He makes a trade on draft night, and his first trade that gets him really heavily criticized, in which he trades Jarrett Culver, the 6th pick, for Cameron Johnson and Dario Saric. And he gets criticized for it because Cameron Johnson's supposed to be old, and he picks up Dario Saric. It's a steal of a deal. Like, Dario Saric gave him roster versatility. Dario Saric's a really nice player. He also traded TJ Warren to Indiana, and Indiana sent back cash to Phoenix. Like, I don't know what the story was on TJ Warren, but clearly, he made the decision that he didn't need or want to have TJ Warren on the roster. Didn't pick up an awful lot in that deal. He traded for Aaron Baines and kind of then added a bunch of little pieces. Traded DeAnthony Melton for Javon Carter and threw Josh Jackson into that deal. Josh Jackson was the 4th pick. That was a problem. I mean, there's clearly the first thing James Jones did is, and we don't, whoever takes our job doesn't have to do this, got rid of a bunch of pieces that were problematic, right? So TJ Warren, clearly he didn't want on that roster anymore. Josh Jackson, who was the 4th pick of a draft, who had off-court problems, they didn't want anymore. He signs Ricky Rubio. He re-signs Kelly Oubre. He makes a bunch of kind of move. And then his premier move is he trades Ricky Rubio, Kelly Oubre for Chris Paul. He stuns kind of the draft world and takes Jalen Smith 10th. We'll see how that works out. He makes another kind of, and then he just starts signing solid veteran players. So Jay Crowder gives him a little depth, personality, stretches the floor for DeAndre Ayton, gives him a little toughness to pair with Chris Paul. Javon Carter, who did not play a lot. And then goes to veterans. Langston Galloway signed Damon Jones as a center, which didn't work out and got rid of him. E'Twaun Moore, a veteran at the back of the line, re-signs Dario Saric. They're just subtle little roster construction moves along the way. And obviously the big one is Chris Paul. The big piece he already had on the roster was Devin Booker. The drafting of Mikal Bridges and the trade that they made the year prior is a massively important deal to who they are and how their franchise has been built, because he's absolutely terrific. And is as important a piece as they have here with their 3-and-D. And that was an unbelievable trade by the Suns. They traded with Philadelphia. They traded their pick Xavier Smith and acquired, and I think they got a future first-round pick from Philadelphia to get Mikal Bridges, because Philadelphia, and that was a fabulous deal because Xavier Smith doesn't play. And then they added Torrey Craig as an athlete to fill out their roster. They found Cameron Payne on the scrap heap. I mean, it's not that wildly complicated, right? They had a star in Devin Booker. We have that. They got the number 1 pick in DeAndre Ayton. That's our Rudy. They drafted Mikal Bridges with a brilliant pick. We haven't really had the chance to have that same pick along the way, but we did miss on like a Dante or a Trey Burke, who'd be pretty old at that point. We used that Grayson Allen pick to go get our Chris Paul, like in Mike Conley. They signed Jay Crowder. That's our Bojan Bogdanovic. Like their Cameron Johnson pick is terrific. We haven't quite found that one. We developed the Joe Ingles kind of instead. That would be probably our Cameron Payne. And they added Dario Saric for a little roster versatility, and we went kind of the same model with Derek Favors, and we probably got to find roster versatility that they have. That it's an interesting look. It's not crazily different than what we've done as a franchise along the way. All right, we'll get to your questions and your comments and your thoughts on it on our live, now almost always live show. Wow, this is going to be so weird. I don't know if I'm like prepared for having you look at my ugly face every single day and actually having to maybe, well, I'm a I'm just going to like wet the hair, put on hats. Like I'm not going to try to look good for you guys. I hope this does not like offend you in some way, shape or form. Our Michelob Ultra moment of the week has to be Monty Williams. Monty Williams is an unbelievable, heart-wrenching story. His wife and kids in a car crash. His wife passes. Has to raise the kids. He's in Oklahoma. He gets to raise the kids, but he has to do it alone. He's in Oklahoma City as an assistant coach. They support him. He moves into the front office of the Spurs so that he can have a better life, and then he makes the move in this, dealing with terrible tragedy. I can't imagine how broken his heart is at the same time, not being able to share this with his wife. But the moment to see him have that joy and have that success, that is our Ultra Michelob moment of the playoffs. Joy, happiness, and enjoyment. It's only worth it if you enjoy it. 2.6 carbs and 95 calories. Joy creates success. Enjoyment isn't the end game. It's the whole game. It's your Michelob Ultra playoff moment. Hashtag Ultra moment. Give me any suggestions you have if you have one else. Chris Paul winning it as well. Maybe Chris Paul hugging Lil Wayne. Is that the version of it? Hashtag Ultra moment from Michelob Ultra. Today's show is also brought to you by Rock Auto. Rock Auto creating a fabulous place for you that's easy to navigate, keeps you the price is right for you. Explore their website today. You'll see it's an old school, easy to navigate place, and you'll see that you can get brake pads, you can get brake parts, you can get tail lamps, you can get motor oil, everything, windshield wipers, anything you can imagine is available at Rock Auto. And the best part is the family business has been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. So every price is reliably low for every customer. Whether you're a do-it-yourselfer or whether you're a professional, Rock Auto is there for you. So why choose to spend 30, 50, or even 100% more on the same parts at a chain store or a car dealership? Do it at rockauto.com. Explore their easy-to-use website today. Find a solution when you find your parts. Just as you're going to check out, make sure you write Locked On in the How'd You Hear About Us box. That's Locked On in the How'd You Hear About Us selection. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. It's rockauto.com. All right, now that we are live, let's get to your questions. We'll be live on YouTube. Right now, we're live on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and Periscope. We're eventually, I think, just going to be live on the YouTube. So if you could subscribe at Locked On Live, which will eventually be Locked On Jazz, that will be for you. The Suns aren't better than the Jazz, Clippers, Lakers, or Denver. They're just healthy. I don't know if that's entirely fair. So it's true that they're healthy and that everyone else is not. And I do think it's true that I thought the Clippers and Nuggets were probably the best teams. But on the other end, they were healthy during the regular season as well. They're good. Like, yeah, I mean, I don't know that we would have beat them. I don't feel totally comfortable with that. They're constructed as well as anyone to deal with the Lakers. DeAndre Ayton's a real force, almost forces the Lakers to keep a center on the floor because of the fact that Anthony Davis doesn't want to deal with him. Jay Crowder then defends him pretty well. Mikal Bridges probably deals with LeBron as well as anyone can. Chris Paul puts them in some awkward situations. I think they could have given the Lakers a hard time. Jokic, again, they probably are constructed about as well as anyone. They can run a lot of pick and roll with Ayton, who's a force. Have Chris Paul bothering Jokic defensively. I understand what you're saying, but I also think that's every season in every NBA playoffs. Like, I really do think this is being overblown a little bit. Length, athleticism, and mid-range won the West. A bunch of things we gave up to do all the offense, no perimeter defensive route. So I do think length is wildly important. Like, if you look at them, Ayton's a big 7'1", Booker's decent size, Mikal Bridges is super long. Jay Crowder's not actually that long for that position. I don't know that I think the mid-range won the West. I mean, like, Chris Paul hits some mid-range shots and Devin Booker does. And so maybe allowing your players to like go to their best spots and be able to play things. But if you still Cameron Johnson and Mikal Bridges and DeAndre Ayton's kind of force at the rim, the thing that's interesting to me is here's where I think I would kind of maybe agree with you a little bit, but I think is interesting is that Phoenix this year was only 14th in the league in rim attempts. And the league has really decided that you're taking away rim shots. And so they did alter, and take the mid, they became comfortable with the long two because they have Chris Paul and because they have Devin Booker. They took the fourth most mid-range shots in the league, but they also took the 15th, amount of threes. They were even across the board in threes and rim shots. It's not as though they abandoned either of those two things, and they had a unique personnel that made a lot of them, right? So they were making 45% of their long twos. That's still not a great shot, but if taken at the right point in the shot clock at the right moment, when other opportunities have gone by, you've already bypassed the rim, you've already bypassed your three, and that's what you're going to get later in the shot clock. And as the shot clock winds down, then that's a pretty good shot. But if you're playing to that shot every time, it's probably not the great answer. So I wouldn't want to overplay that, Brandon. If Rudy Gobert is our best isolation defender when teams play 5 out, why not put him on the best scorer, i.e. Pollard? I'm sure teams would still hunt switches, but would at least force them to involve Rudy. Spencer, I think that's a legitimate discussion. Was there a point in the playoff series where I thought the Jazz could have just put Rudy on Paul George and just manned up? Now, the problem was not necessary. So, yes, I think that's legit. And then I think, the problem was that Reggie Jackson was blowing by everybody, right? And that Marcus Morris was getting by guys. And so then when Rudy's pulled out, he's going to help. And then Terrence Mann, went bananas from three. Still hasn't made that many threes combined since. So I do think that, yes, Rudy having to play isolation defense and sometimes on switching from we're going to leave because everyone's going to be able to shoot. The model we went with is we're going to leave Rudy on their worst player so he can stay to the rim. Maybe we're going to put Rudy on their best player, and so he can automatically impact. I think there's a decent chance. Who are some of the second-round draft picks with decent points gain rating? You know what? Or second draft players. Oh, Dustin, that is great. Let's do that tomorrow. I'll do that on tomorrow's show. I'll pull that up tomorrow. That's a great idea. So who are some of the kind of unsung guys that maybe points gain things are higher valued than otherwise? We'll do that. From Andy, thanks for a great season. We're all down, but just a little first, at least 3 to 4. Wasn't that just the first at least 3 to 4 years of championship runs? Let's hope. I think we have the pieces, that we can do that. So I think that's a possibility. Arn says he totally agrees on the idea of players changing their narrative, and that's probably worth looking into. Jordan Clarkson, frankly, changed his narrative with us too, right? Like Jordan Clarkson's a player that I don't think anyone in the league expected to be able to do what he's doing with us. And the final thing from Lee Christensen, I'm happy for CP3 and Crowder, but watching that in the back of my mind, thinking if the Jazz were healthy, this would be them, was depressing. I was fully depressed watching their celebration. And, I've never gotten to call a Western Conference Finals and certainly never gotten to call an NBA Finals yet. And, on a personal level, that's certainly, where I was. Two Bluebird says, do you think a Joe Ingles trade would help the Jazz? It seems to me his contract is well suited for a trade and could get them a really great bench player. It's a big loss. Let's talk about it. Tomorrow, we'll discuss players in points gained that maybe are better than we think, and we'll talk about whether Joe Ingles is a trade piece we'd be willing to trade. We'll talk about them all. Thanks very much for jumping in. Sorry, the questions I didn't get to. We'll be live each and every day for you from here on out, at least whenever I can, if I have internet connection that does it, as Locked On Jazz moves to YouTube, all part of the Locked On Podcast Network.